Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump
So
for
I
trying
guess,
to
I
impeach
guess the
him
answer is you won't support that
after
request.
you now know that
So
Joe
let
Biden
me
tried to cover up
do
Hunter
this.
Biden's involvement with
Excuse
Ukraine?
me. Let me.
Watch Adam Schiff launch into another dramatic rant filled with accusations, conspiracy theories, and media talking points, while Pam Bondi refuses to cave to the political circus.
Shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today, I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House press secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that mean
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly,
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you know,
I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether he took the money?
All I know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Leavitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
and,
was she?
Senator Schiff,
was she
if
right?
you worked for me, you would have been fired because you were censured by Congress for lying with your egregious...
We can stipulate to, you can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
Personal attacks? You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking...
But what we're interested in...
borders are.
What we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You were
asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Homan taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you support?
You don't have to tell me what is my decision and what is not my decision. I said you can talk to Director Patel.
You don't have to try to.
You think you've got a gotcha with Tom Homan, our borders are.
Excuse me.
Who's been out there fighting for our country since Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed I believe the American people, should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump for trying to impeach him?
I guess the answer is you won't support that request.
After you now know that Joe Biden tried to cover up Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine.
Excuse me. Let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Homan kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Homan paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You were asked, a law degree,
excuse
Senator
me,
Schiff?
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire
career. You can attack me later,
career.
and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day to day.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair. I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now
what
the
about
current
the
president.
Fires in California?
And
Do you
this
care
is
about that,
supposed to
Senator
be.
Schiff?
This is, excuse me. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about the
Are the riots in LA serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology.
When will it be
your entire career, frankly,
that the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're a failed lawyer
refuse
because
to
you don't
accept,
understand when someone can and cannot answer a question.
Refuse to accept personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander?
With
Will
that,
you apologize
Madam Chair,
to Donald
I yield
Trump
back.
for slandering him? Personal slander.
Senator Brett.
May I ask unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to introduce into the record the statement of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who warned that the Comey indictment is a democracy-threatening abuse of power. May I also request unanimous consent for the introduction into the record of 282 former career officials at the Justice Department raising an alarm who were voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave the department because of improper actions taken by the Department of Justice. May I introduce, with unanimous consent, the Justice Department manual that talks about when initiating and declining charges are subject to impermissible considerations. And finally, Madam Chair, may I introduce the letter from Michael Ben-Ari, a career counterterrorism prosecutor, DOJ, a letter he nailed to his door, which concludes by urging officials to do the right thing for the right reasons, to follow the facts and the law, and raises the alarm that the decision to remove experienced career officials from U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI, and critical parts of DOJ undermines our country's abilities to counter terrorist organizations, malign nation-state actors, and countless others that seek to harm our nation and its citizens. And he believes that the priority is prosecuting the president's enemies
or are you admitting
rather than
Bondi,
protecting
Ms.
the
Bondi,
country.
one moment.
May I have unanimous consent
Are
to
you
enter
entering
these
that
into the record?
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Brett.
Senator Moody, may I clarify one thing he entered in the record? I just want to say that I believe he entered a letter by 200 and something former employees. Well, I believe the spokesperson for that letter was also the spokesperson for Jack Smith.
Senator Brett.
What you just watched was one of the clearest examples, yet of how today's Democratic Party operates when it no longer has facts strong enough to carry the argument. Adam Schiff didn't walk into that hearing looking for answers. He walked in looking for headlines. The entire performance was built around one goal: paint the Trump administration and the Justice Department as corrupt before the hearing even began. And honestly, none of this should surprise anyone anymore. This is the same Schiff who spent years pushing Russia collusion narratives that ultimately collapsed. Years of television appearances. Years of dramatic warnings about threats to democracy. Years of claiming walls were closing in around Donald Trump. And after all of it, Americans were left with more media hysteria than actual results. So now the strategy has shifted again. Instead of Russia, it's weaponized DOJ. Instead of evidence, it's implication. Instead of oversight, it's performance politics. From the very beginning of this exchange, Schiff came armed with emotionally loaded accusations and media-generated narratives. He threw out claims of bribery, corruption, cover-ups, political retaliation, and abuse of power almost nonstop. But if you pay attention carefully, there's a pattern here. He constantly framed allegations as if they were already proven facts. That's incredibly important, because once you do that, any refusal to validate the accusation becomes evidence of wrongdoing in the eyes of the audience you're trying to influence. But Pam Bondi refused to play that game. Over and over again, Bondi pointed out something Schiff desperately wanted to avoid. These events took place before she was even confirmed as Attorney General. That matters. A serious Attorney General cannot simply invent answers or speculate publicly just because a senator wants a viral exchange for cable news clips. But Schiff kept pushing anyway. Why? Because this hearing was never really about getting information. It was about creating the appearance of scandal. Look at the structure of his questioning. He repeatedly demanded that Bondi personally validate accusations involving investigations she did not oversee at the time. Then, when she refused to speculate, he immediately accused her of refusing to answer. That's not oversight. That's political entrapment. And honestly, Americans have seen this exact formula before. Democrats and their media allies build a giant narrative around anonymous leaks, dramatic accusations, and selective outrage. Then they pressure officials into making inflammatory statements publicly. If those officials refuse, the refusal itself becomes the next media narrative. It's all designed for clips, for social media, for outrage, for headlines. Meanwhile, Bondi stayed remarkably disciplined throughout the exchange. She didn't panic. She didn't lose control. She didn't hand Schiff the explosive soundbite he was fishing for, and you could clearly see how frustrated that made him. At several points, Schiff practically abandoned questioning altogether and turned the hearing into a speech. He started rattling off long lists of accusations, complaints, and grievances in rapid-fire fashion. Hopping quantity would substitute for proof, but saying something loudly does not make it true. And one of the most revealing moments came when Bondi pushed back and brought attention to the broader political context Democrats don't want discussed. Schiff immediately tried to shut that down and returned to his prepared attack script. That tells you everything. Because what Democrats fear most right now is scrutiny of their own double standards. For years, conservatives watched federal agencies, prosecutors, intelligence officials, and legacy media outlets aggressively target Donald Trump from every possible angle. Americans saw raids, investigations, indictments, leaks, surveillance controversies, and endless media hysteria dominate the political system for nearly a decade. Yet somehow, Democrats now suddenly present themselves as deeply concerned about the weaponization of government. A lot of Americans simply do not buy it anymore. And that's why moments like this matter politically. Schiff thought this hearing would reinforce the narrative that Trump's administration is abusing power. But to many viewers, it likely reinforced something else entirely. That establishment politicians are still obsessed with relitigating anti-Trump narratives, while everyday Americans are worried about inflation, crime, the border, energy prices, and national security. That disconnect is becoming impossible to ignore. And then there's another uncomfortable truth Democrats never want to address. If Bondi had done exactly what Schiff demanded, and started casually discussing investigations, evidence, tapes, or prosecutorial decisions in a politically charged hearing, those same Democrats would immediately accuse her of unethical conduct and politicizing the DOJ. That's the trap. They demand behavior they would instantly condemn if the roles were reversed. So Bondi's refusal to speculate wasn't weakness. It was restraint, it was discipline, and frankly, it was probably the most responsible thing an attorney general could do in that situation. By the end of the hearing, Schiff looked less like someone conducting oversight and more like someone auditioning for another primetime MSNBC segment. The interruptions became more emotional. The accusations became broader. The speeches became longer. And the actual factual substance became thinner. Meanwhile, Bondi stayed standing while the attacks kept flying. And that's the part legacy media coverage will probably ignore. Because the real story here isn't that Schiff asked tough questions. Congressional oversight is supposed to involve tough questions. The real story is that Democrats increasingly approach these hearings with verdicts already decided before testimony even begins. That's dangerous. A justice system cannot function on partisan assumptions, media pressure, or political rage. It has to function on evidence, procedure, and actual law. And despite the non-stop attacks during this hearing, Bondi never gave Schiff the political ammunition he desperately wanted. That alone explains why he became increasingly frustrated as the exchange went on. At the end of the day, millions of Americans watching this are probably asking themselves a very simple question. If Democrats are truly confident in their arguments, why do their hearings always feel more like campaign speeches than fact-finding missions? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did Schiff expose corruption? Or did this hearing expose just how desperate the anti-Trump political machine has become? And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because there's a lot more coming.